without you, there is no me, right? Very enlightening last night. This next topic is practice these principles in all of our affairs. I'm going to do a reading from the Big Book, chapter Working with Others, page 100. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. I'm going to open it up to Jane.
Everybody, my name is Jane. I'm an alcoholic. And real quick, I said it last night, but I'll do the run-through. Sobriety date, November 15th of 2000. Home group, Ludwig's Corner, Wednesday night, 7:30. Sponsor, Sammy G. She knows me. She's my sponsor. And I actually texted her last night. She usually goes to bed early, but she was up. And I have the privilege of sponsoring women in this program, and that has been a great, great gift, you know. And so my topic, I thought about just when I thought about my topic, I said, well, I can kind of go with my story on this one because I had no principles. And I came into AA and I learned, and I learned some. And let's see. I grew up in New Jersey. My mom got sober in 1969. She's here today. She came out. My friend Mark went and picked her up and brought her out, and I'm really happy she's here. She's a big part of my story, And my mom got sober at a time when women weren't getting sober. She got sober in New York City, and my dad still drank. And like I said, there wasn't a lot of unity in our home last night. In our home, I said that last night. And I was, I always felt. Listen, I'm convinced I was born restless, irritable, and discontent. Right? And I know that now because when I had my second son, who's 15 now, he was born restless, irritable, and discontent. He came out of my womb like fucking pissed, right? He was just like, yeah, right? And he just, he always says, he's like, Mom, I got like a knot right here. He has the words, and I get that, right? And that's how I was. I was like, ugh, right? Ever since I can remember. And so my idea of fun when I was young was not like normal kids, right? Kristen would come over from down the street and she'd be like, let's play Barbies, And I was like stripping them naked and cutting their hair and having them have sex, you know what I mean? And I was like, and she was like, oh my God, I was like, and I had a propensity, I liked violent stuff, and, she was like, let's play outside the lemonade stand. And I was like, okay, we'll set it on fire, and that's what I did, I set the lemonade stand on fire. And that was the kind of stuff I did, right? And, where she would like to play in my room. And so I would be like, hey, why don't we stare into the light bulb? This is I did this, right? And then when you look away, you see all these trippy things, and then you chase them. And that was a game to me. And I remember her standing there and be like, I think this hurts your eyes. I'm like, who cares, man? You know what I mean? And so, my idea of fun was way off from other people's idea of fun. But I grew up in AA, right? I went to meetings with my mom, but I had no idea what it was to be an alcoholic. And I think my mom recognized that ism in me, way early on. And I resented her for that, right? I got mad at her for that, And I didn't like my mom at all. I'm going to tell you that right now. I didn't like her. When she talked, I cringed. When she said something, I was, don't talk to me. As a teenager, I became very rebellious. I was very difficult. I was a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 16. My first drink, My first drink was actually with a girl named Allie Palmer. And Allison's, this is a true story, great uncle is Bill Wilson. And Allie was the first person I got drunk with. And me and her are still friends today. And she actually took my mom and I and her mom up to Bill Lois's house in Bedford Hills when Lois was still alive. And so, so AA has kind of always been in my history, right? And I come from a long line of alcoholics. So there's my mom and there's my grandmother who died of cirrhosis when she was 42. There's my mother, my grandfather I'd never met, who was a raging alcoholic, and then my father's side, both his parents, and so on and so forth. And so pretty much everybody is alcoholic. I'm looking at my mom, like, right? Except for like my Aunt Diane, who married one, and that's about it. So I mean, it's a real, in our family, it has been a very generational disease. Anyway, so and I remember saying when I was younger, I'm never going to pick up a drink. But as soon as I felt it relieved that boredom for me, right? Because I was always bored, nothing was like fun, nothing was cool. I mean, the book talks about contempt prior to investigation. When I first heard that, I was like, that is me, because what my head does is somebody's like, hey, let's go ride a bike. And in my head, I get like my leg over the bike, which seems really exhausting, right? And then I got to ride the bike, and then what if there's like a dog, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, I just rode that bike and it sucked. So like, I'm not going, and that is kind of exactly the way that I live my life, And then Bob kind of touched about it too. If I walked in a room, I could notice everything that's wrong with that, with what's going on immediately. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the setting? That's a little uncomfortable. Why is that so bright? Why are the shades up? Why, my mind immediately goes to everything that's making me uncomfortable in that moment. And so drinking relieved a lot of that at a very early age. And like I said, I was a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 16. I was sneaking into school. I figured out you can put Kahlua in milk and make some White Russians, and it looks like chocolate milk. I did stuff like that. I was outright rebellious. I was, like I said last night, I had a lot of anger, so I was defiant. I was the kind of girl in school that was, let me describe it to you. I wore a black leather biker jacket. I wore my hair, I have an Aquanet. I had my shit, it was tight. I mean, it was, I had long nails. I wore bright red lipstick, I had cat eyes. And if you looked at me, I was like, what? And I thought it was badass, right? And I had an affair with a wrestling coach, I was constantly in the principal's office. I was constantly telling teachers to F off. And I was a problem child, And my mom didn't know what to do with me. She would, and I would, get in fights with her. And I, and I was just awful. And I couldn't control my emotional nature, And I started hanging out with these older guys, right? Because they gave me what I wanted. They gave me what I wanted, and I gave them what they wanted, right? Because really early on, I found out that having sex got me what I wanted, and so I was got a reputation, by the time I'm a junior and senior in high school, but I don't sleep with anyone in my grade. I sleep with men. I like men, and that's my thing. And I figured out I was like a stalker, and I was really good at it. And so I would like stalk these guys, and I was just a nut job. I was just a nut job all the way around. And anyway, so I'm just taking a minute here. By the time I graduated, I was really well into my disease, and I was really already on a road in a lot of trouble. And I couldn't be nice to anybody I had no friends, I had no real friends. My friends that I came up in high school with didn't really want to hang out with me anymore. I didn't have anybody that I was close to. My parents, the only one who really hung out with me was my dad. And for some reason, he loved me to death and whatever, and I could be cool with him and we could be cool. But other than that, there wasn't really anybody else, you know. So, you know, it's funny. I graduated barely, and here I am. I'm 17 years old. I think I was 17 when I graduated because I was young as a senior, and I was 17 years old when I graduated. My dad pulled some strings. I couldn't get into any colleges. I barely took the SATs. I couldn't get into colleges, and my dad was teaching law at Fairleigh Dickinson University. He was an attorney, and I started going to this school. And the minute I went into the school, I was sitting down, and this girl looked over at me and she goes, "Hey, do you party?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Let's go." And that was it. That was my college career. You know what I mean? It was like that quick. And so I'm at this. So when I'm young, the partying I go to is, you know, there's a lot of people. By this time, I am not social in my partying. So that was at New Year's Eve. I was at this party, and it was 4 of us. You know what I mean? And it was this guy that I was kind of dating, this other dude, and some other dude, and me. You know, and we're all sitting around looking at each other, and we're all a little creepy, and we're all sweating a little bit, and we're all just, you know, trying to have a good time, and going to the bathroom a lot. And this is New Year's Eve. This is like my party New Year's Eve. And this guy walks in, and up until this point, I never had a boyfriend. I didn't have a relationship. I had sex with a lot of guys, but I really just didn't like anyone long enough. But the truth was, I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I didn't know what even that meant. You know what I mean? And so this guy walked in, and he had like ripped jeans and a cut off Metallica shirt on with long shaggy hair. And I was like, "What's up?" You know, and he was a scumbag, man, and I liked me a good scumbag. And something about him is that he didn't drink and he didn't do anything, and that was awesome. And so I, you know, convinced him that I was a nice girl that night, and I kind of slowed myself down, and I kind of stopped going to the bathroom as much, and I kind of like, kind of sat next to him, and I kind of got flirty with him. And by the end of the night, you know, he asked me out, and that was the goal, right? Because at this time, my stalking skills, I've honed them in a little better, right? I know how to get a date at this point. And so he takes me out, and I have no skills. I really, really like this guy, right? He takes me out on this date. His name was Billy Z, right? And he was so cute. And he takes me out, and he takes me back. We go back to his house, and he lived with his mom. I mean, he was like 24. I was like 18 or something like that. But he was a good guy. Like, you know, he took care of his mom. He worked. You know, he didn't party a lot. And I'm like, I'm going to marry this guy, you know. I said, this is it. This is the guy I want to be with. And so what I decided from that moment on was that I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop doing stuff. I'm going to be this girl. But the problem is I have no tools. I have no idea how to be in a relationship, right? See, because I don't have any principles, right? I know how to have sex, watch a movie, and fight, and not in that order. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? I know how to arouse jealousy, suspicion, and fear. That's what I know how to do, right? So I try to get in this relationship, and what I do is I stop drinking, and when I stop drinking, what I don't understand is that I'm left with my alcoholism and no solution. So I stopped drinking, and he'd come home. Well, first what I did was I worked as a bartender and a waitress I worked in restaurants since I was 14. So by this point, I had lied to get this job at this biker bar in Paramus called Nichols Alley. And I was waiting tables and cocktail waitressing there. And so I get this bright idea because I'm going to get married to this guy. I mean, he doesn't know I'm going to marry him yet, right? But I get this bright idea that I'm going to marry this guy. So I tell him that I'm going to quit, right? Because we do that, women. We quit our jobs when we meet guys, you know. And so I quit because I want to stay home and be with him. Now he works and he goes off to work and I wait. My sober ass self just waits for him to come home, you know? And this is like 1993, so you know, like cell phones. And he goes off to work and I think, I wonder what he's doing. I wonder if he's thinking about me. So I call him and he's a truck driver. So he's got to they have to CB him. Right? Somehow they connect with him on the CB. And he's like, are you? And he gets on the phone. He goes, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. Miss you. What are you doing? He's like, nothing. I'm working. Okay. When are you coming home? When I'm done. Okay, love you. Okay, bye. I did that 4 times a day. You know? And he'd come home and I'd say, hey, hi. And he'd come, hey, you know? I wouldn't make him any food. I wouldn't do anything. I just stare at him. You know? And he'd sit and I'd say, how do I look? He'd say, you look good. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, I look all right. Okay, do I? And then if he had the slightest deviation in eyes, you know, they do that when they maybe look away, look up or some shit. What was that? What? Because I'm a mind reader and I know what that means. So I'm like, what? And you're like, nothing. And I'm like, nothing. I don't think that was nothing. Because you see, in my mind reading skills, I'm now going to figure out what that look meant, what that nothing meant, and now we're fighting. Because I can make a fight out of nothing. Because I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. Because I'm not comfortable in my own skin. And because if I think something, it becomes truth. That's how my disease works. Right? And so now I've thought it, and now it's truth, and now we're in a fight, and I'm going to win. Because I'm right. And I'm sucking the life out of this guy, right? And I'm like, am I hot? Am I hot? Am I cute? Am I cute? What about me? Me? You know? And then we go out to dinner and, you know, a beautiful woman would walk in, you know? And I notice her because I'm very much about my surroundings and my competition, right? And I notice her, and then he looks over and he notices her and he makes eye contact with her. And in all my psychic ability, I realize that they're sleeping together. And I decide I'm taking this girl out. And that's what I do. I grab her by the hair and I'm like, oh yeah? Sleeping with my guy? She didn't even know us, man. She's like, what just happened in my life? And he's looking at me like, you're crazy. You're crazy. And that is what I do when I fall in love with someone. So, those are my principles. So granted, after about 3 months, he was like, I'm going to get a dog. And he told me to leave. And he didn't even ask me to move in. I was staying, right? I went over one night and I'm like, I'm not leaving. You know? And so what happened was when you know what, I didn't bring up my cell phone, so I have no idea what time it is. So if somebody can just kind of keep giving me like a little thing. So I don't even know. So what I do is I come home and I get in my bed in my sweats when he dumps me, and I get into bed for about 2 weeks. and I think, what am I going to do? Right? Because I got nothing going on but him. And my dad calls me up and he says, hey, I met a lady in San Francisco. Why don't you come with me? And I was like, all right, I'm going to San Francisco, right? And it talks like Bill talks about that we have this great ability to kind of bounce back from stuff like that in our drinking. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to California. And you know what? I am going to go and I'm going to walk down the street and I'm going to be looking cute. And somebody's going to be like, you. And I'm like, yeah, me. And they're like, why don't you come with me? Because I'm going to give you $1 million. And I'm going to make you a star. And I was like, I know. That is actually going to happen. And I believed that to my car. I got in my 82, thanks Mark. I got in my 82 Honda hatchback, baby blue, stick shift. And I drove on Route 80 and I got out west. And I proceeded to go into the San Francisco Bay Area. It was like 1993. And I started partying like a rock star, man. I had arrived. You know, I lived down in the South Embarcadero, down by Delancey Street. My stepmom, my soon-to-be stepmom, was an attorney out there and a raging alcoholic. I could say that she's dead from alcoholism. She said, hey, right away she started drinking buddying me, right? She said, hey, I got a girl that looks just like you. I got you a fake ID. I was like, I love you, Mom. And she said, I got this great green bud. I'm just going to roll a joint right now. And I said, I'm never leaving you. And then I proceeded to hit the bar scene in the San Francisco area and hit the scene. And I was, I was excited. And I was young and I was hot. And I was like, what's up? I'm here. And I proceeded to do what I always did. And I started drinking and found other things, right? Found something that kept me up for 3 years. You know, and when you're up for 3 years, you kind of lose your mind. Get like sleep deprivation. You find truth. Become a shaman. You know, I was all those things. I was deep, you know. I was living with a band, right? And we were traveling. And I got another relationship. I met this musician who was famous long before I met him. He was a lot older than me. He was about 20 years older than me. And he played with a famous band and he had wrote some albums. And, you know, he was pretty well known. And when I met him, he was smoking crack. But my mind doesn't say, I might smoke crack. My mind just says, he just hasn't met the right woman yet. We're gonna make you a star again, babe. I'm here. Don't worry. You know? And I was with that man for 2 years, and it was the most abusive kind of relationship. I mean, it was, you know, it was bad. You know, we got kicked out of a lot of hotels, and that was back before the OJ trial. So when you got the shit kicked out of you and you're kicking the shit out of each other, the cops said, you want to press charges? You said, no. I said, okay. They left, you know, and it was bad. And so God really removed that relationship from me because I think he went on we got in a fight. So he went to play one weekend in Vegas and then he married somebody while I was there. I was like, okay, I guess I'm out, you know. But thank God. Because I myself, I couldn't leave that relationship, you know? And I'm not a victim in that, you know? Of course I was young and naive and those types of things, but man, I kept going back, you know? There's a part of me loved that chaos. I love the violence. Even today, you know, I find myself, if there's like, you know, a fight going on, I'm like, yeah, you know? I don't know what that is. So I came back from California convinced that I was a drug addict and those types of things, and I try to do what you try to do in those types of situations, and I still didn't like my mom very much. My dad, you know, did the best he could with the situation, and I came back and we moved. My mom had moved to Pennsylvania, and that's how I ended up in PA, and I came down here and I drank the way that I like to drink, and I had the same kind of relationships I like to have, and nothing much changed. November 5th of 2000, my father died, and when he died, things changed. His death did something to me. Not outwardly. I'm not an outwardly emotional person. I don't cry a lot. I don't get choked up a lot. I don't, I'm barely alive. No, but anyway, I don't, but I got very angry when he died. And even though I was very angry already, I got even angrier, because that person that made everything okay was gone and out of, and was taken from me. And I was upset about that. And you know what? I know today, I believe this today, that my dad's death, if my dad hadn't died, I don't think I'd be sober today. And then what I believe is that when my dad was kind of faced with that decision, do you want to go back or do you want to stay? And maybe God showed him if you stay, your daughter's going to get sober. Then maybe he chose to stay there to help me, because my dad was suffering from this disease just as much as I was. But we didn't know it, right? I mean, I'm starting to know it. I'm starting to know something's wrong with me. I always knew something was wrong, right? I mean, me and my mom talk about it. She can remember me talking when I was very young and being like, Mom, something's wrong with me. And I can remember her trying to take me to a psychiatrist or, and those types of things. But I hated them all. I thought they were all retarded and dumb. So when my father died, that was a huge catapult into the end. And I'm not going to go into it. It was about 9 months. I inherited a little bit of money. He didn't have a lot, but there was a stepmom involved too. That was a little crazy, but I inherited a little bit of money, and I took that and I partied like a rock star. And I winded up on my knees one night. And up until this point, I was raised Catholic, but I had kind of God's over here and I'm over here, and because what I believe is God only loved good girls, and I am really not a good girl. I've never been a good girl. I came out of the womb a slut. You know what I mean? I just never I like boys, I like guys. I didn't boys, I like guys. And I was, I was rude. I did not respect my parents. I wasn't, there was nothing about me that was really likable. So I didn't really think God liked me that much, I thought he had to love me because I'm a child of God and shit. But you know what I mean? But I didn't really think he liked me that much. And so what I believed is that he only loved good girls. So when I got on my knees that night, I was desperate. And he showed me exactly who I was. And you don't have to believe that. It just was true. He showed me that I was a selfish, self-centered girl that let everybody know that I didn't need you. That thought I knew everything, that thought I had the answer to everything. And I was humbled and shocked about the person I really was, because I was living a delusion. And I didn't come out of that experience oh, I'm sober. You know what I mean? I literally physically tried to drink for the next few weeks, and I violently would throw it up. And then my last drink was October 23rd. My sobriety date is November 15th because I like to smoke pot. And then, eventually I had to figure out that wasn't sober, And then I couldn't get honest for 3 months in AA about that, right? Because I was you can't lose the 3 weeks. You know how we are when we're now, oh shit, And so, and I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to share with you kind of my journey into AA. When did I start? 2:45? Okay. So, and what that looks like. How I came in, what happened, and how these principles, when I think about principles in all my affairs, I can't help but not think about principles before personalities, right? And I think even Bob really touched on it earlier today about, if I just see the personality, if I just see the crap, not the story behind, not beyond that, not what happens to them. I can't get beyond the personality. I can't. If I don't put myself in their shoes, if I don't do that, I can't get beyond that personality. It's impossible, right? And so I have to do the work. before I can get to that place where I'm putting principles before personalities. And that has been a process for me through the years. And I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom was so happy that I hated it, right? But I did it anyway. I was up in Harrisburg. No women would come up and talk to me. You know, I don't know why, but 2 guys came up and 12-stepped me. A guy named Dennis. I can't remember the other guy, but I always remember Dennis because I see Dennis at Sunlight of the Spirit every year, you know, and he's like, hey, I'm like, hey. And I'm like, you helped save my life. And Dennis gave me a big book and bought me a cup of coffee, and he told me a couple meetings to go to, and he told me for a couple of women to ask for, and he just nice guy, just pointing me in the right direction, right? And then I moved in with my mom, and I thought, oh God, I'm 26 years old and I gotta live with my mother. And I wasn't happy about it. And we started this journey of healing, and it's been a long one. And I'm gonna share it because it's so important to my recovery and in the learning these principles. And so when I came to York, I got a home group. And my first sponsor, her name was Meg I. And she taught me about the fellowship. And she did take me through the steps, but I don't remember having any big profound thing, because when I came into AA, it was more about the fellowship. I was more about the party kind of attitude. I was more about who's who, right? I'm like, who's hot, you know, who am I dating, right? Like, what, you know? And so that was really how, you know, coming into AA, but I did really want to be sober. I did. And I wanted to be the best AA member ever. So, Meg was loving, and she taught, you know, she helped me trust women again. She helped, you know, there were a lot of women, and we did a lot of cool stuff. Like there was like spaghetti dinners and like dances, and I loved that crap. You know, I was all into it. And so there was this guy across the room, right? And he was like the only young guy there. And I thought, because I'm a stalker. And I thought, he's hot, you know? And then he talked about the big book. And I was like, look how sober he is. That is a sober guy right there. And I made sure at some AA function that I got right in his line. As I do, you know? And eventually he asked me out for coffee, and we started dating, right? So now I'm like, I got a reason to be in AA, you know? I got a better reason to be in AA. But like I told you earlier, I don't have any principles in a relationship. I know how to have sex, watch a movie, and fight. That doesn't change when I get sober. And so we go about the best we can. And I'll go back to that. About a year into my sobriety, there was a group that used to come down from Baltimore that used to be kind of Tom Flynn. It was all Tom Flynn's people, and Tom would come up, and they would be with their big book, and they'd come to our meetings in York, and they'd be with their big book, and I'm like, look at these big book Nazis, right? I was like, Jesus, like, EK, got it, big book. You know what page things are on. We got it. You know? Jay remembers. I mean, Jay's an old York, right? So, but I would put a lot of energy into them, and they would put none into me. And that bothered me. And my boyfriend decides to ask one of them to sponsor him. And I thought, why? And then I sat down with them one day. And they were talking some things out of the book that I never heard. And I was like, wow. And so I asked one of them to be my sponsor. There was one lady out of there that, you know, because women should stick with women, but I did not like her at all. And I thought, if I have to ask that woman to sponsor me, I might as well drink. And but I was able to ask the one guy, and he did. He said, I'll work with you. And we started to go through the steps, and he introduced me to these 12 steps. and these principles like nobody ever did. And what he did was he put me on the firing lines of Alcoholics Anonymous. He really taught me about service, right? And my program catapulted into, 12-step calls and institutions and jails. And we did a lot of traveling, and we had a lot of fun in AA. I had a lot of fun. And I told you last night, like, I could come into AA and I could be alive and I could be happy and I could be all those things, but when I went home, I was an asshole. And I needed some help. I needed to grow up a lot, And I've been doing a lot of growing up in AA, a lot. And sometimes I can even catch myself today, and I'm like, whoa, I am so 14 years old right now, the way I'm acting. You know what I mean? I get in a conversation with my 15-year-old, I'm like, oh yeah? Right? Like, well, your ass stinks too. I just get like retarded, And, we're it's just amazing how, how much growing up I needed to do and still do. So I'm doing this work, and I'm sponsoring these women. I started sponsoring women. I started working with women. And again, like I said last night, I'm going through this thing where I'm thinking it's about me. It's all about ego, and these girls are firing me. And then I kind of go through kind of another spiritual experience in AA where I kind of realized that if I want to really grow, I need to grow in all areas of my life, right? I need to grow at home. I need to grow at work. I need to grow in the way that I sponsor women. So that's when I got introduced to Sammy. And that's when I believe, started to grow. That relationship that I'm in, and how I told you it was beginning, we get pregnant and we have a son. And we don't know how to be kind and loving towards each other, right? We don't know how to do any of those things. And that's kind of what happened, why I got introduced to Sammy. And I went down to Sammy, and I remember I moved out of where we were living, and I moved out and I got my own place. And I said, I hate this guy. And I used to just talk to him like I hate him. He's so arrogant. He's so arrogant, right? And I was introduced. I had met Sammy before. I had known Sammy, and so I went down to talk to her, and I said, look, I have this baby with this guy. I don't really like him. And right before I went, he asked me to marry him. And I said yes. Even though I didn't like him, because I wanted a ring, and I was like, wanted to get married. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay. And so I said to him, look, I told this guy yes, and I don't like him, and I'm going to marry him, and we have this kid together, and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, okay, real simple. She goes, what I want you to do is, she goes, I want you to go home, and I want you to treat this man like a king, okay? And what that means is, she goes, when his cell phone rings, you're not to ask him who's on it. And when he walks out the door, you're not to ask him where he's going. And if the trash needs taken out, you take it out. And she goes, is that your apartment? I said, yeah. She goes, and you pay the rent. I was like, well, if he stays there more than half the time, can he pay the rent? No, because I'm all about half. I'm all about you pay your half and maybe pay mine, right? So she said, no. She said, I want you to listen to him when he talks. If that's the man you love and the father of your child, she goes, I want you to listen to him. Start to love what he loves. Do the things that he loves to do. She goes, and you're not to talk bad about him to his face, because I'm big on that. I'm a name caller. I'm mean. I am mean. Or behind his back. And I thought, are you kidding me? First of all, I'm not some subservient woman. She goes, I'm not asking you to be. She goes, I'm asking you to act with principle. And she goes, and if he's a man about God's business, he will intuitively pick up on what you're doing and he will follow. And if he doesn't follow, then it should be really clear about whether you should spend the rest of your life with this guy. And I was like, whoa, okay. And I went home and I tried to treat him like a king. And I'm not telling you that I did that perfect, right? But I started in little ways. Like I started to figure out how he liked his coffee, and I started to make his coffee for him. And he liked ice cream at night, because I don't know why all men like ice cream at night. And so I would start bringing him ice cream at night. And I started making his lunches. And he was a contractor, and he loved contracting. He loved it, right? And so he would talk about it. And I'd always be like, that's nice. And instead, I sat and I listened. And I got interested. And I actually learned some things, right? See, because I'm unteachable up until this point. And I started to learn some things, right? And I actually went on jobs with him. I've hung drop ceilings and put on siding. I've been a cut girl on jobs. I mean, I can do stuff, right? And he intuitively picked up on what I was doing. And when his cell phone rang, I didn't ask him who was on it. And when he left, I didn't ask him where he was going. And he intuitively picked up and he followed. Now, he always made a joke that he was there already. I just started to notice. And that could be totally true. I'll give him that. And we started this journey together. Then that was my first really introduction of starting to practice principles in all my affairs, right? And then I had to learn, and I'm going to go back to that relationship, but then I had to learn how to do it in my job, and I touched on that last night. I had to learn how to, my boss in the beginning was like, here, can you fax this? And I'm like, you fax it. You're right there, And then I'd call my sponsor, and she'd say something like, they pay you a check to fax it. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, okay, right, yeah, okay, I'll fax it. So I had to learn how to do that kind of stuff. And as the time went on, and I learned how to be a better sponsor, and I learned how to work with women better, and like I said, putting myself in their shoes and learning to have compassion and all those kinds of things. And as my journey went along, and we had another kid together, and we're riding along in our nice AA life, right? And I'm pregnant with my second child, and my husband goes out to the garage at about 11 o'clock at night, which I thought was a little weird because I'm setting up for the next job. And he comes back in about an hour later, and he says, I just smoked crack in the garage. And I was like, oh, okay. And that started us on this journey that took me to places that I didn't know was even possible, right? And so, although he kind of put it down for a while, his behavior, like that whack-a-mole, was a little off, wasn't like him, right? He was having an affair, spending money, there was a lot of crazy things going on, and I'm sitting back, and what's happening to me is I am suffering from alcoholism, and I have not even picked up a drink, because I'm in it with him. I'm mentally in that shit show with him, and I don't know how to get out of it because I am, whatever year sober I was at that point, and I don't know, And I'm actively going to meetings, and I'm actively being sponsored, and I'm actively sponsoring people, but I'm in it, And so what happens at that point is he picks up again, and he is gone, just gone. And I am having almost like a nervous breakdown. I have these two little boys, right? And I don't know what to do, and I can't even function, and I can't even say anything, and I'm scared, I'm terrified, right? And my ego is like, I can't even handle it. And thank God for the girls that I sponsor, because I needed them so bad at that moment, right? And they would show up and they would take me to meetings, and I couldn't even sit. And I remember sitting in my home room, I was like, I gotta get out of here. I just couldn't even sit there. I couldn't even handle it. My mom would come over and she'd sit with me, and I would just break down on the bathroom, and I would just be a wreck. I was like, my life is falling apart. These little kids are not gonna have a dad. I screwed their life up, because you don't know when you AA girl meets AA boy and AA campus that you're gonna spawn out little alcoholic children. You don't know that. You don't know what you're doing. And now you got all this damage. And that's all I could think of was, oh my God, I screwed up. I screwed this all up. And my sponsor said, you need to go to Al-Anon, and that's all you need right now. And this is not an Al-Anon meeting, but it saved my life, And I walked into Al-Anon at 11 years sober, and I did not want to be there. I'm like, I am Jane, I am an alcoholic, I'm 11 years sober in the program of AA. I was so like, I'm just letting you know who I am, And they did a beautiful thing for me. They taught me how to detach with love. They taught me to separate the man from the disease. They didn't tell me to stay or leave. Because a lot of you had opinions about that. And they just let me find God again and figure it out. And that's what I did. And I did an inventory on that relationship, and you know what? I was really angry at him, right? And then Bob touched on this, and I had to really look at this. And I'll tell you what, when me and my boyfriend, my husband, were dating, he said to me, I don't want to get married and have kids. And I was like, that's okay, because I do. I don't care what you want. I want it. And so I realized that I forced that whole marriage and kids, and we had a house. We had 3 houses. We had 2 investment properties. That's a nightmare, right? We had 3 houses and 2 dogs and 2 kids. And I created this life, and I was right in the middle of it, and I was like, I am so miserable. And I had to take responsibility for all of it. And going back to what my sponsor taught me, I started to love my ex-husband again, love him in his disease, be of service to him in his disease. Not in a way that was going to hurt me, but in a way that wasn't going to hurt my children. Right? Bob said something last night that was huge for me. He talked about his sponsor saying that God pays his servants well. It's something like that about his old sponsor. And people told me, you need to go after him. Child support. And I was like, no. You need to do, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. And I didn't do any of it. And I said, do you want to see your kids? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Let me know when you're sober. I'll bring your kids over to you anytime you want. I didn't say, give me money. I'm paying for everything. I had a moment here and there. I'm not a saint. But 85, 90% of the time, I was able to stay in the solution with him. And because of that, my boys loved and respected their father, even in the depths and dirtiness of his disease. And that's a gift to them. It's not about my ex. They got to feel that love. They got to understand that love, And that is principle. And, my 19-year-old, had a moment when he was about 16 or 17 where he really realized that his dad was full of shit and that this is all crap, and he had his kind of coming to manhood type of moment with it. And my 15-year-old is just blocking it out with his weed smoking, I guess. So, whatever, But for the most part, AA saved the day. And I'm so grateful for that. And now, my mom, I'm going to talk about my mom. And I brought her here today. Because that has been a relationship that has been so hard for both of us. And I'll tell you what, It took me 9 years in Alcoholics Anonymous to forgive her. It took me 11 years to love her. And I can honestly say today, like, I want to be around her. You know, you talked about the John Wayne of mental. My mom is the John Wayne of mental toughness. And without saying too much, is that she came into AA, and my mom, had some great stories and some great experience, but she didn't really actually go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous until she was about 30 years sober with my sponsor. And you want to talk about John Wayne, you want to talk about Irish toughness, right? She would work 2 jobs. She wouldn't put up with any of my shit. She was tired. And she did it. And today we can have some real conversations. And she can say to me, I can understand why you didn't maybe like me so much, or how I acted in a moment, or how I was. And I can honestly say to her, I was such an asshole to you. And we don't get in an argument about it, you know? And I'm so grateful for that. Because it was in loving her that I started to love me. You know, it was in being a mother and seeing how hard this job was that I was able to love her and know how hard she fought to break this generational chain. It is not easy. Nobody likes you when you're doing that, you know? And she was doing it. And today, I got a couple more minutes. We have a beautiful relationship. We hung out the other day, and I really wanted her to be here today with me. I wanted to share this with her. I wanted, and I don't normally want to share anything with her. I don't like to share, to be honest with you. So about 5 years ago, I met a guy, and I was really jaded with people in AA. I didn't want to date anyone in AA, so I went on Plenty of Fish. And went dating, right? It was awesome. You should do it. If you haven't done it, do it. It's good. It's a good time. And I got on this date with this guy, and my sponsor early on told me how to write an ideals list, right out of your sex conduct, write your ideals, right? And so that I wrote a second ideals list after I went through a divorce, and after about a year, and I started dating again or whatever. And I went on this date with this guy, and I wasn't immediately attracted to him at first. I was like, a little short, And we sat down, and he started to talk about his children. And he started to talk about how he brings cereal. His son loves cereal on the boat for him so he can go fishing with him. And I thought, that's a good dad. You like bringing cereal on the boat? That's a pain in the ass, And he was just a really good man. And our principal, where we were at in life, he went through a bad divorce, and I just went through a bad divorce. And he had just beat cancer. He's a cancer survivor. And he's a hard worker. And I got into this relationship, and I didn't want to be in it. And I got in this relationship. I wanted to be in it until I moved out here, and then I was like, I got to go. And then my sponsor told me to stay. And in that that's been the hardest place for me to practice principles, is in my relationships, right? And so I moved in with this guy. And what happens to me when I get into self is that I instantly become a princess that demands everything. And I was very like, oh God, I got very stuck in this kind of mentality. And I kept going to my sponsor, and I kept having to say, I don't think I belong here. This guy doesn't give me fire, right? You know what I'm talking about. When you're addicted to a guy or addicted to a girl, you get that like, right? And I'm like, I don't get this with this guy. But what I did get was this kind, loving consistency that I had no idea what to do with. He treated me with principle naturally, right? And as I kind of walked through this journey with him, I started to follow, you know? And it's been such, and you know, in the last couple years, I've woken up and been like, I'm so grateful for my life, you know? I have 2 boys that see me sober. I have a son at Drexel University right now, who joined the National Guard, you know, who I'm just so proud of. And I have a 15-year-old who, yeah, smokes weed, but let me tell you something. I said, you know, you need to come home and do your chores before you go leave and disappear again. You know, and he shows up and does his chores. You know, gives me a hug. I love you, Mom. I'm like, I love you too. Don't die out there. You know what I mean? I'm like really dramatic, you know. And I'm so grateful for this life. I'm so grateful that AA has taught me principles, you know, that despite how everyone else is acting, I can still be consistent. So thanks for letting me share.